sino que
were lowered
los
quite a
embalses se
lot.
construyen
Plus,
para reducir
the
la
dams were
variabilidad de
reduced
las
to
precipitaciones
reduce
naturales, es decir,
the
para corregir hasta
and
cierto punto
correct
y poder distribuir los caudales. Sin embargo, en Entre
the
Peñas y
flows
Buendía,
of water,
si las
but from
precipitaciones
Entre
descendieron
Peñas
un
and
50,
Buendía,
la variación o el descenso de
rain
caudales
was
embalsados ha sido de un
reduced quite a lot,
62%.
but
Es decir, la gestión del embalse
the
no ha hecho de
management
colchón
of the
ante la
dam
disminución de las
has not
precipitaciones, sino al revés. Ha acusado más que esa reducción de las precipitaciones. Sin embargo, en San Juan, en Madrid,
But in San
la
Juan,
reducción de precipitaciones o de aportaciones
the
fue menor, un
reduction
35%, y,
of rain
aunque sea
was
ligeramente,
lower,
el
and
embalse
even
sí que ha
though
reducido
the dam has
esa variabilidad
reduced
de las
that
precipitaciones hasta un 31%. Es decir, se ha
has reduced
gestionado de
that
forma
to a
diferente. Y la principal
31.6%. So the
diferencia que
management
hay
has
entre
been
estos dos
different. So
embalses,
the
estos dos
basic
modelos de
difference between
gestión,
these two
es el
management
trasvase.
systems is the
Porque
water
lo que se ha
transfer,
hecho es priorizar siempre las
because they
necesidades
have
del trasvase,
tried to
que son fuera de
prioritize
la cuenca,
the
sobre las
needs of the
necesidades
water transfer
de la cuenca del Tajo y de la zona
over the
ribereña
area
de los,
of the
de la
cuenca
comarca de los
of Tajo.
embalses. Y esto tiene
And
consecuencias.
these obviously has
Cuando
consequences.
se construyeron los embalses,
When the
y
dams were
antes,
built,
desde 1960
and
hasta
from the
1981, que es la época en la que
1960s
se
to
construyeron los embalses,
1981,
pero no
which are
entró a
the
funcionar
years in
todavía el
which
trasvase Tajo
they
Segura,
were built,
resulta que la
but the water
incorporación de
transfer was not
un
that
activo con
not
este
yet
potencial,
there.
como entre el Mar de Castilla, entre Peñas y Buendía, permitió que el éxodo rural
It
fuese en los
enabled
municipios de ANREP, estos de aquí, fuese menor que en toda Cuenca y Guadalajara rural. Es decir, Cuenca y Guadalajara rural cayó un 52% de la
the
población,
exodus to be
mientras que
lower
en
in
ANREP
the
solo
area
cayó un
of
39%. Es decir,
Cuenca and
como hay un
Guadalajara
activo
was higher
especial,
than
grande,
in the
muy
area of
importante,
the ANREB.
amortigua el éxodo rural. ¿Qué
So
ocurre
it helped
después?
to
Pues en el
reduce that
momento que empieza a
exodus.
funcionar el trasvase, se reducen los
When
caudales o
the water
volumen de agua
transfer
embalsado
started
entre Peñas y
working,
Buendía, y como consecuencia de ello, la población desde el 81
the
hasta
population from
2016
1981
cae
to
más del doble
2016
en la comarca de
decreased,
Entre Peñas y Buendía que en
fell
Cuenca y
in
Guadalajara rural.
21.3% with regards when compared to the area of Cuenca and Guadalajara.
No se cuida o no se
So
tiene en
if we do
cuenta
not
la
care
necesidad
and we
que
do
tienen
not take
estas
into
comarcas de
account the
comarca,
environmental
de que haya un
needs of
cierto nivel de
that
embalse,
area,
pues no hay actividades,
there are no
económicas,
activities,
no hay
economic
actividades
activities,
turísticas y recreativas,
tourist
y
activities,
la
and
gente se va.
therefore people have to leave.
Esta es la evolución del embalse de
This
San Juan
is
en
the
azul,
evolution
la población del
of
embalse de San
the
Juan y la
dam
población de
of
de
San
Andrés,
Juan,
¿no?
the
Como se puede ver,
population
había
of
5
one
veces más habitantes
compared
en
to
Andrés
the population of Ambret.
antes
So
justo
you
de la
could
construcción de los
see
embalses,
that there were 5 times
y
more
ha caído y ahora
population
mismo hay
in
más
San Juan
población
before the
en,
building
en
of the
los
dam,
municipios de San Juan
and now we
que
have
en Andrés, ¿no? Se ha
more
reducido,
population in
ha desaparecido la diferencia.
Anrep compared to San
Alguien
Juan.
podría
So the
decirnos,
difference
bueno,
has disappeared.
claro, es que San Juan es de Madrid y eso tiene
Well,
muchas cosas.
maybe
Bueno,
we
lo
can
hemos
say
estudiado,
San Juan
y
is from
realmente
Madrid,
no, San Juan está fuera de toda la corona metropolitana donde
it
se ha
is
producido
really
todo el
away
crecimiento.
from
Y
the
de hecho se ve como en San Juan
metropolitan
se ha duplicado
crown
la
where
población, pero ha
growth
crecido menos
has
que en la
taken
Sierra
place.
Oeste, que son los municipios de la comarca de San Juan, pero que están más próximos a Madrid. Entonces realmente no ha habido efecto capitalidad,
So there's
es decir, la
been
población
no
de San Juan ha
effect
crecido
of being
porque en
near
San Juan hay actividad
the
económica, no
capital.
por vivir cerca.
In San Juan, basically there's been
Eso lo
economic
hemos podido
growth.
comprobar viendo los crecimientos de
We've
los
been able
municipios
to check
cercanos
this
a Madrid
by
y los de la
observing
Sierra Oeste,
the growth
donde los
of
otros de la Sierra Oeste
the
caen y San Juan
municipalities
crece. Y
near
además hemos
Madrid
visto que San
compared
Juan es
to
el
the
municipio,
mountainous
San Juan es el
areas.
municipio que primero
San
de los,
Juan
el más lejano que pasa
is the
de los
furthest
5.000
away
habitantes, ¿no? San
that
Martín de
is
Belleville.
beyond 5,000 inhabitants.
Bueno, en cuanto al análisis económico,
As
que es lo que
for
hemos
the
visto
economic analysis,
dentro de Cuenca y Guadalajara
within
rural,
Cuenca and Guadalajara,
dentro de Cuenca y Guadalajara rural, resulta que
Cuenca y Guadalajara,
esta zona, o Cuenca y Guadalajara rural, están deprimidas económicamente, tanto en el sector agrario, con unos rendimientos por debajo de la media, con mucho menos regadío que la media de la meseta. Cuando hablamos de la media de la meseta es Castilla y León, Castilla-La Mancha y Extremadura.
Castilla-La Mancha and Extremadura.
Tienen mucho menos regadío que la media de las provincias, que la media de las zonas rurales. También esto es una comparación entre zonas rurales. Y también tienen mucho menos empresas industriales por cada 1000 habitantes que el resto de las zonas rurales de la meseta. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que ocurre? Y bueno, por ejemplo, un caso muy llamativo donde se ve claramente. Durante la burbuja inmobiliaria, Cuenca y Guadalajara rural creció la edificación un 30% y en en red solo un 18%. Es decir, toda España estaba viendo un boom inmobiliario, especulación, etcétera, menos en esta zona, o al menos no al mismo nivel, ¿no? Lo que es un indicador de una depresión o una recesión, una crisis económica o una situación de depresión económica con respecto al resto, a su entorno rural, no respecto a las provincias urbanas o respecto a las capitales de provincia, no, respecto al entorno rural, ¿no? Y de todo lo que se desarrolló, porque se desarrollaron una serie de urbanizaciones residenciales para Madrid, ¿no? En el Mar de Castilla, y podía haberse construido aproximadamente 2.000 nuevas residencias y solo se construyeron la mitad, es decir, se quedó a medias, ¿no? El desarrollo económico. Y lo que se ha visto claramente, estos son plazas turísticas que cuando los volúmenes de embalse caen, que es la línea roja en estos últimos años, ¿qué hacen las plazas netas de alojamiento turístico? Pues van totalmente paralelas, ¿no? Es decir, si no hay embalse, la gente no viene. Si el embalse está seco, la gente no viene a hacer turismo rural aquí, porque el gran atractivo de la zona eran precisamente sus embalses. Entonces, ¿qué ocurre? Pues estamos en un callejón sin salida. Es una zona deprimida económicamente donde la agricultura, la poca agricultura que había, ha sido eliminada y se prometió sustituir por un modelo de desarrollo basado en actividades turísticas y recreativas basadas en los embalses. Pero si el embalse está vacío, no hay actividad, porque no hay muchas alternativas, porque todos los otros indicadores de actividad económica están por debajo de las medias rurales de las provincias, ¿no? Entonces, si hay baja actividad económica, pues obviamente baja renta per cápita, y si hay baja renta per cápita, pues la gente se va a buscar sitios donde pueda ganarse la vida mejor, ¿no? Y se alimenta una espiral de despoblación. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que ocurre o qué es lo que hemos analizado en esta zona? Y que pues, quizá podría, sin la característica diferencial de los embalses, pero podría replicarse para muchas zonas de interior, ¿no? Estamos ante una zona rural desfavorecida y las decisiones tomadas por las administraciones públicas justo no han tenido en cuenta a esas zonas más desfavorecidas. Entonces, si partes ya con un déficit de activos económicos y además la política económica imperante no compensa eso con un tratamiento especial, ¿no? Pues, ¿qué es lo que ocurre? Pues que obviamente nos encontramos con el problema de despoblamiento de la España interior que tenemos hoy.
Buenos días a todos. Gracias al profesor por esta invitación a ADELPA y a la asociación. Soy alcalde de un pequeño municipio del Pirineo, en la comarca de la Jacetania, y como presidente también de ADELPA,
I represent also ADELPA. It is the association of all the local entities of the Aragonese Pyrenees. There are more than 100 partners, and from ADELPA, I haven't bought any presentation because we were asked to be brief. I'm going to try to explain the problem of depopulation that we have. The Aragonese Pyrenees is depopulated profoundly. We have a density of population of 3.5 inhabitants per square meters, and if we add the three main cities, we would reach 6 inhabitants per square meters. From Adelpa, one of the drivers of its creation was the attempt linked to a local initiative that was going to generate 20 or 30 employments in Negrado. We tried to create
de grupos ecologistas e incluso de la Confederación
fish farm.
Hidrográfica
There was several protests of people who didn't agree. Small communities joined Adelpa to be able to claim that certain policies that are made in Zaragoza, in our case in Madrid or in Brussels, do not take into account territories. They just end up setting obstacles. The Pyrenees
excedente de muchas cosas, excedente de población,
are excellent
como he dicho, somos una zona profundamente despoblada,
many ways.
que continuamente hemos
Population,
cedido
we have a
capital
serious
humano a otros
depopulation
territorios,
problem.
porque la
We
falta de
have
infraestructuras.
transferred
Hace poco la
population to
Diputación
other
Provincial de Huesca, en esta
regions.
zona,
There's a lack of
ha instalado la
infrastructures.
banda ancha, que ha
We've
sido un
just
gran logro, pero yo
recently
muchas veces
had
lo digo, en mi pueblo, por ejemplo, casi no queda gente
bandwidth
joven, no sé qué van a
and
hacer,
internet
habrá que promocionarlo.
installed.
Hemos sido cedentes de paisaje.
We've
Gran parte de
also
nuestro territorio,
transferred landscape.
Es Red Natura 2000, con las
A
consiguientes
part of our
restricciones
territory
que hay
belongs to
a la
Red
hora de
Natura
gestionar. Nosotros, los propios
2000.
habitantes del territorio, lo que
This
queremos hacer es
entails
conservar
certain
nuestro
limitations. What we
territorio
want to do from our point
y
of view
dejarlo
is
en
to
perfectas
preserve
condiciones, pero
our
queremos
territory
revertir, porque si no,
and
llegará un momento
have it in
que
good
las personas que
conditions.
vivimos en el territorio seremos una
But at
especie
the
en
same
extinción,
time,
que
we
ya casi
need
lo
to
somos,
earn
pero
our
pronto
living, and
posiblemente no
we
quedará
wouldn't
nada. Por
end
eso una
up
de las
being
líneas de trabajo
ourselves
de
humans
Adelpa
living there,
es
an
potenciar
endangered
la ganadería
species.
extensiva de
Not
montaña
only
como vínculo
can we
de fijación de
promote
población, de desarrollo
extensive
y de
livestock
mantenimiento,
as
sobre todo de los montes.
a link
En el
to
tema del agua,
maintain
como ya he dicho, uno de
mountains.
los,
With
en el
regard
ADN de
to
Adelpa está
water
el tema del agua,
from
porque fue
Adelpa,
uno de los motivos de su fundación.
water
En los últimos
is
tiempos
among the pillars
hemos
of our
estado trabajando
foundation.
con la reversión de
We
los saltos
have been
hidroeléctricos.
working to be able
En
to
el siglo
reverse
pasado, en el siglo,
the
se
water
crearon grandes
system
infraestructuras
implemented,
hídricas en el
and during
Pirineo,
last century,
que
big
hicieron
infrastructures were built
pantanos, canales,
in the
que llevaron
Pyrenees,
el
creating
agua
channels,
aguas abajo
dams,
agua
taking
para Zaragoza,
water
agua para regar
to
grandes sistemas de
Zaragoza,
riego
to
productivos
irrigated
en todo
lands
Aragón. Y
in
también se crearon
Aragon,
grandes infraestructuras
and we
por
also
medio de
created
concesiones hidroeléctricas.
large infrastructures for
Al
hydroelectric
final en el
plants.
territorio, ¿qué hizo? Lo vació de gente,
This
vaciaron los valles más
meant
productivos,
emptying the
y llevaron
territory,
toda la
the
riqueza
most productive areas,
aguas
and
abajo, no a las
taking the
cabeceras
wealth
de los ríos pirenaicos.
at the end of where the water was
dentro de esas concesiones
was
del agua, que
used.
es de dominio,
Within
es de dominio público,
the water concessions,
había
taking
una
into
parte
account
de esa
that
energía era
water is
reservada.
public domain,
Nosotros
a
entendemos
part
que
of
para
the
la restitución
energy
del territorio
had to
y para el
be
propio desarrollo de este
reserved
territorio.
for
Hasta la fecha,
the
Confederación,
territories,
en nuestro caso,
but up
Confederación
to now,
Hidrográfica,
the
siempre nos
water
lo ha
management
negado.
company
Recientemente
has always
han
denied us
empezado a ver,
this possibility.
se han terminado concesiones
Recently,
de centrales
certain
hidroeléctricas que han
awards have
revertido
been
al Estado
given that have been in favor of the state,
y nosotros lo que pretendemos es
and
reivindicar
our
que
aim
parte
is
de estos beneficios
claim
que
that
generan
part of these
aguas abajo
profits that
reviertan en
are
el territorio
generated
para
where the
cosas como
water
fijar la
is used
población,
should
para
be
eso, y que lo hagan siempre
reinvested
contando
in our
con los habitantes
territories,
del
taking into
Pirineo.
account the
Pues los
inhabitants
habitantes,
of
por lo
the
que veo que
Pyrenees.
aquí siempre muchas veces nos centramos nosotros en nuestro propio territorio,
We
pero veo
tend to
que la
focus on our
problemática es
own
común en toda
territories,
España.
but I can see
Uno de los
that
mayores
many of
problemas
these
es que,
problems are common
lo
to
habéis dicho
other
muchos,
areas of
no
Spain.
se
One of the
cuenta con la gente
problems
del territorio
is that
a la hora
we don't have
de
the
hacer. No se le pregunta,
support.
no se le hace, pues,
We
nosotros
don't
queremos,
ask
pero también las
the
medidas que
people
se hagan, que se doten
from the
de la
territories
adecuada
what they
financiación.
want to do, what
Pedimos,
they think about
nosotros
certain
hemos
matter.
reivindicado tanto al gobierno de Aragón como a Confederación
We have asked the government of Aragon and the water management company to respect water regulations, water management done in an adequate way, the construction of water treatment plans. We have 200 plants that have been declared of national interest, and up to now we've had none of these built. They had been promised, and this is the current situation. We are the main affected to have water that is clean, that is maintained.
Ya no voy a decir nada más en que se cumpla la directiva marco del agua.
We want the water framework directive to be complied with,
y extensible a los demás, que haga que parte de los beneficios que
so
generan
that
las
part
aguas
of the
abajo
profits that are generated where the water is used are reinvested in the population, in these areas where we transfer population, water and other resources. This is the summary of my presentation. Thank you.
Estaba haciendo multitareas. Bueno, y ahora
was multitasking. Now we have a long panel. We would like to ask the speakers to please try to be brief. It is also true that it's going to be complicated, but let's try.
Esta sexta ponencia es la política
agraria
comunitaria llamada PAC
is on the Common Agricultural Policy and Rural Development.
Enseñándonos un poquito el catedrático de Política Agraria de la Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, el señor María Sumsi-Viñas.
From the Polytechnic University of Madrid, José María Sumsi-Viñas, the head of the Geographical Unit in Rural Development from the European Commission from 1988 to 2017, Mr. Félix Lozano Gallego.
El presidente de la
Fundación de Sevilla, Savia's Foundation in Sevilla, Mr. Casero Rodríguez, the coordinator of the cooperation project Fruta de Manubles, Mrs. Yolanda Jimeno Cuenca, from Torrijos de la Cañada, Zaragoza, the prehistory professor of the University of Jaén, Mr. Arturo Ruiz Rodríguez, the professor of prehistory from the University of Extremadura hasn't been able to attend.
Es verdad. Bueno, después de la señora Yolanda,
after
pasaremos
Yolanda,
a Ana Ruiz Conde,
we will give the floor to Ana Ruiz Conde, the manager of the Local Entities Association from the Pyrenees, ADELPA. Jesús Garzón.
¿Está Jesús Garzón?
Haid, is he in the room?
¿Segundo apellido?
Hayden is his surname, the second surname, from the Association of Transhumance and Nature, Shepherds Without Borders, and the president of the Cuenca section from the Association of Celta Mountain Range Development, Mr. García Berlanga. So you can get up and take your seat.
Que cuando terminen estas ponencias,
once we have finished this round of presentations, we will have a break for lunch with a small catering organized upstairs where you had coffee to be able to continue with the afternoon session afterwards.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Empezamos, ¿no?
Shall we just start, right?
¿El orden que tenemos?
Shall we follow the order that we want to follow, or? Apologies, but some comments are being made without a microphone and we cannot hear them properly to be able to translate them. Apologies. The speakers should use a microphone.
Bueno, buenas tardes ya.
Good afternoon.
Como ha habido un entendido, primero nos avisaron para hablar de la paz, después de agricultura y ganadería.
We were going to talk about the common agricultural policy, then we were going to talk about agriculture and livestock, and now we've mentioned the CAP again. So, taking into account our time limitations, considering that I live in the countryside, we are always concerned with time. I would like to thank people for the work that they're undertaking. Many presentations have been talking about the same problems this morning. The situation is clear. A lot of evil things join us together. It is difficult to work in the countryside on day to day, and it is necessary to set a strategy. As a result, the rural world is losing importance when it comes to taking decisions. We can analyze the programs of the difficult political parties, and we can see that the rural world is not present in those programs. In Andalucía, as you know, there's been a change of government, and the 90 points deal. There is not one reference to the rural world or any of the problems that we are mentioning here. A government such as the government of Andalucía should take these things into account. So we are in a situation in which we need to set strategies to work together in different spheres, but joining efforts is important. The demonstration on the 31st of April showed our strength, and seeing the results of all this was mentioned during a couple of days in the media, and now we've forgotten about this. We were talking about forestry just a moment ago, and I was thinking that if we analyze what's happening, a lot of the income that is being generated is related to a situation that was built many generations ago. We are enjoying the fruits of that work. Nowadays, we don't seem to think about the future, we only think about the present, and this has a negative impact. What is happening in the agricultural and livestock system? As we can see the evolution in the last years, a system is being developed. It doesn't take into account sustainability. It doesn't take into account the mindset of our grandparents who were fighting to be able to leave a better environment to their grandchildren. The only important aspect is now. The future is not considered. There are many contributions from agriculture, from livestock. There is a clear deterioration of the soil. We've talked about water. We are in an important city, Madrid. What does this city need on the day-to-day? This city doesn't produce anything. The water comes from the rural area, energy comes from the rural energy, food comes from the rural area, landscape, etc. Do inhabitants of this city know about this? Are they aware? previous speakers were talking about the lack of compensation offset. Is this being taken into account? Sometimes it is said that rural sphere receives many subsidies through the CAP. Only 3% goes to rural development. Is this enough? Do we really value the people who work in the countryside? In Andalusia, we've always had a strong debate with previous governments. We hand out 12, 14 medals on Andalusia's day, acknowledging merits, and very rarely these medals are awarded to people from the countryside. We all have to work in our own spheres, but towards the same direction. We have to highlight the value of whatever is rural. People who live in the countryside, women, men, have to feel valued. Different associations of young people who are now studying at university, some of them have the goal of going back to the rural sphere. This has very little added value right now. And this is one of the keys. When young engineers mention the economic assessment of this village in Valencia, this is important. It is important to value the contributions of the rural world. Another important matter, and because it has a global vision, has to do with the production systems, forestry, agriculture, livestock, taking into account not only the production but also the conservation of the soil, of the landscape, well-being, and especially the self-esteem of people knowing that they belong and that they are important. Sometimes we say competition. I've had the privilege of being in the first line of work. Organic oils are the best products. They always have the best awards out of the 10 best ones. We're always talking about organic oils. We have different products such as these. We've moved forward quite well. Stability and production. This last weekend, 3 times a year in Freixo Domeiro, we have open days, and it is interesting to see how the production is made in these centers. It is important to develop this fabric. Young people need to have their own self-esteem. They cannot consider Madrid as the important place to be. Their village has to be important. Has to build their self-esteem. Who's controlling this? It would be great not to have the control, to be, so that it would be something shared between us. We have to view In the rural world, agriculture and livestock, according to the studies of Pilar and Francisco, if we establish the relationship between these activities and the subsidies, we would really see that they are the ones with the least subsidies. And they're also essential with regard to the common agricultural policy. There are huge differences in Andalusia. Some areas can receive between 2,000 and 3,000 euros per hectare olive trees, and in Sierra Morena, for example, 120 euros, when the production costs are much lower in Úbeda compared to mountain range areas. This is important for maintenance and approval. The same goes for territories. That rural world that is live is never taken into account. No opinions are taken into account. We were mentioning the Pyrenees before. Irrigated land, water is welcome, but it is incredible to think that the areas where the water comes from cannot benefit from these activities. It is impossible to maintain this system. We have to realize that this takes us to a problematic situation. We have cities in which in 2030 we will have billions of inhabitants. We have a recent study from the Scientific Research Council that says that people with the same economic conditions live much longer in the rural world. Why do we continue insisting on blocking the progress of the rural world? Does this make any sense? In the rural world, the article of our constitution here in Spain, all Spaniards cannot be discriminated. And we are being discriminated by territory, by the place where we live. Are we ensuring the livelihood of these people who live in the Pyrenees so that they have a full life, favoring not only production but also the marketing of products? And considering that I'm very disciplined, I'm going to give the floor to my colleagues. It would be great to have a Q&A session. I think that's the interesting part of all of this, and that's what we should do.
Good morning, everyone.
Buenos días.
Good morning.
I
want to thank, on behalf of Adelpa, Professor Murillo for having invited us to share with you our vision on this important forum. My name is Ana Ruiz. I'm the manager of the Local Entities Association of the Pyrenees of Adelpa. The president of our association has already spoken before me. We are comprised by many city councils and town councils of the area, most of them with less than 500 inhabitants. And we are a rural area with another important aspect, which is also a problem, which is the mountains that surround us. And this motivated in 1983 for these 100 city and town halls to gather together to try to fight this problem in this rural area and mountain area, which is located, and this happens quite a lot in Spain, in a very peripheric area. We believe that the problems and the gathering of solutions in our area, in our territory, can be applied to many other mountain territories and even rural areas that share the same problems that we very well know and the reason for which we are here today. Specifically, as to livestock and agriculture, as probably many of you know, in the areas of mountain areas, we are linked to livestock mainly because of a lack of territories and due to the characteristics of that territory as well. As to the primary sector, it's been used mainly for livestock and more specifically for extensive livestock. And we believe in Adelpa that agriculture and livestock, extensive livestock, is a factor in mountain areas which does not only comprises the primary sector, but also the preservation of resources and affects basically the mountain territories. This is why, from the very beginning, these town halls have focused on the problems and the crisis of the primary sector of livestock, of the extensive livestock in the Pyrenees of Aragon, which is probably this problem shared by other rural and mountain areas in Spain. This led us to do a research promoted by our association in which we analyzed from 2000 to 2010 the extensive livestock in our territory, which is over 11,000 square meters. The reality of those 10-year study shows that 512 extensive livestock productions had disappeared. We have now 1,500, so 1 out of 4 of each livestock had disappeared. This territory, as our president mentioned earlier on, and from an urban point of view, people associate our area, Huesca, with ski activities, and it is true that tourism has grown quite a lot, and it's been an alternative, a development alternative and a life alternative, thanks to which there hasn't been such a huge depopulation, but there are other activities such as this one that cannot be replaced. Tourism cannot replace this. And this tourism that comes to these areas come because of its landscapes and due to its biodiversity as well. But obviously there's a disappearance, and this is supported by many different researchers. The disappearance of the extensive livestock means that biodiversity disappears, the landscape as well. In this case, our different attractions, the different landscapes will disappear because they are created, and they are that way because of our livestock as well. We did this study, and we have taken this study to the different administrations. We haven't received quite a lot of interest from their side to try to explain to them that this is disappearing, that culture is disappearing. And this leads to different risks, such as, for example, fires, because livestock has also meant a support to this kind of areas. So what is the conclusion? The disappearance of livestock, of extensive livestock in mountain areas and in rural areas, we believe is a problem. a key problem in the order of the administration, and it also leads to depopulation. And we have also realized that in an area, in the small nucleus of population that we have in our area, we have more than 100 town halls, and they have different nucleus of population. They have, some of them have 20, 30, 50 nucleus of population. I think Huesca is the province in Spain with more abandoned towns, and the reality is that in these small nucleus of population, the people, the remaining inhabitants, are those linked to the primary sector, to the extensive sector, which has been the traditional sector in these areas and the ones that still remain. So other problems, besides from this one, we also think that a policy that is also linked to the primary sector, and especially to the extensive one, is the environmental policies. We have also this example in our territory. More than one half of our territory has more than one protection figure. This does not only mean a revolution as to help a sustainable practice and with best practices, livestock best practices, which helps and promotes biodiversity, such as the extensive livestock, but quite the opposite. There are areas, there are parks where it has disappeared. There are no livestock exploitations. So this has not been of help. Quite the opposite. Another problem, which I believe is shared with other mountain and rural areas in Spain, is that within the environmental policies and the attempt to maintain biodiversity, instead of trying to promote livestock and contributing to biodiversity, they are focusing on other kinds of policies. Some, such as, for example, the introduction of big carnivores, such as wolves or bears, in our territory specifically. This is being a huge problem. In our association, there was an assembly recently, and people questioned in that assembly, in that meeting, how do we balance this? Wolves and bears are species that contributed to biodiversity of a territory, but what is the biggest contribution? That which has contributed to the landscape and to the biodiversity, or these species that are not even autochthonous species from our territory in our country. So this is something we have to think about. And it's a problem that we're facing nowadays. There have been a lot of attacks of bears, mainly on a weekly basis, and for extensive livestock, obviously, this is another problem. If we have been working on a 25%, with a reduction of 25% of the livestock, obviously this is going to accelerate this process, and maybe in 20 or 30 years' time, this activity, livestock, will not exist anymore. Plus the other problems that it will bring, such as, for example, the depopulation of other nucleus urbans, loss of biodiversity, fires. So I think that we all here know what I'm talking about. From this perspective, our association believes that the CAP, at least from our point of view, We know that the CAP, with its current configuration and even with the second pillar, the rural development is not promoting it and is not supporting as it should extensive livestock, and specifically in mountain areas. But I think that is something general applied also to other rural areas. In our territory, we see that the CAP policy is an engineering element within a framework used by them because it's impossible that with the resources that they have there to comply with the parameters that are requested and designed to meet. So we see more and more that there are less exploitations, and in the study of Adelpa, which I mentioned before, the result, one of the worrying results, is that most of the exploitations that are still working have no one to be working with it. So they're young citizens, youngsters are not going to continue with that because it's not affordable and because they are willing to do something else. And that is also very worrying. The speaker that spoke just before me, I agree with what he said very much. If we ourselves do not think about this as a very serious problem. We're not talking about depopulation. We're talking about a lack of resources, especially a lack of quality products, because it's not the same, this product, like as a product that can be produced with other formulas. The solution that we from Adelpa have proposed up until now, we believe that there's legislation, that there are ways that are not being implemented for the rural world, one of which, and one for which we have been fighting, is a territorial contract regulated in Spain since 2011, and it's not being implemented. And we believe that it would be one of the solutions, but in order to do so, we obviously need to see will. And that is why we believe that because of the lack of population and the lack of votes, it is not being applied. Lastly, I want to read out 4 lines that are part of the declaration, that the statement that was approved by our last General Assembly, which summarizes a little bit the situation and what the solution should be. The extensive livestock in the Pyrenees, and I think in the whole of Spain, is a model that can fight against depopulation, maintain the landscape, culture, biodiversity, be the basis of natural products, quality product against mass products, release and reduce CO2, and with a very low cost for society. Thank you very much.
Bueno, pues buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you
Saludos y
very much to everyone.
felicidades a la familia
I want
Murillo
to
por el
congratulate
esfuerzo
the family
inmenso que
Murillo
llevan
for the
haciendo
huge
desde hace
effort that they
muchos
have been
años
doing for
para visibilizar
many years to
la
visualize
tragedia que supone
the
para el mundo
tragedy
rural español
for the rural world
la pérdida de población,
and this
¿no?
loss of population that we're facing.
Continuamente se están
We
aportando
continuously
ideas, llevamos
see new
más
ideas,
de 30 años
and
ya,
for
desde
the
el año
last 30 years, from 96 onwards, in the European communities and the European Union, we've had, we wanted to consider ourselves a country with all the rights of Europe, of Western Europe, but I don't know what happened in some kind of curse that we had to deal, which is not because of politicians. I think it's also because of officials and because of technicians. We have to see what is happening in the border of Huesca or Navarre and with France to see that the problems there that we have seen here, it does not happen there. Agriculture and livestock there is seen as a strategic sector. Any shepherd can sell his cheeses, anyone can sell the foie or the vegetables that they cultivate. They are respected, and that is why the families maintain united. There's a lot of cohesion, and there's a generational replacement, but we don't see here the administration requires too many things. You need to have a lot of requirements. You need to comply with a lot of requirements here for example, to become a shepherd, a goat shepherd, to elaborate your cheeses or whatever. And we've seen this throughout the years, but for some reason here in Spain, we do not enable them to become part of the society. So this is very, very... It's a genocide for some reason, and we see this in each of the autonomous communities, and we know who are the people responsible for this problem in each of the autonomous communities. People that in the past had families that were there in the towns, lived, and they were able to sell their products and go to the market, and they had children that studied and went to university, and then they came back home to their towns because they found and they liked the culture of their elderly and of the towns. The last genocide was the commissioner, the environmental commissioner, Mr. Cañete. His surname is the same one as a town that he decided to take several measures as to the payments of the CAP, and we lost over 12,000 exploitations in the last 10 years, over 8 million sheep, and in these 10-12 years, we were able to go from one side of Spain to the other side of Spain and see lots of these livestock, and today it's very difficult for us to see them. It's desert Spain at this point. But this is just the beginning of what we're going to see. We've seen this in all of these maps about how depopulation and desertification is taking place, and we see that numbers for the next few years, and with regards to climate change and the erosion of our land in Spain, are going to be reduced to nothing. And this is a huge tragedy in Spain, even more because Spain is the only nation in the world that from the 13th century has legislation that protects shepherds and enables the movement of livestock throughout the country. That is, the adaptation to climate change with regards to livestock, with too extensive livestock throughout the whole of Spain, and not in small territories of a province or a municipality to be able to go from one place to another. As everything else has already been said, we have to take into account that this is a world problem. Half of the planet are territories similar to the ones. They are arid areas, desert areas, where the only possible livestock, and the only production way for those 9 or 10 billion inhabitants that are going to live in our planet is related to livestock. regardless of the type of livestock that we are talking about. Camels in deserts, in yaks in the Himalayan area, or sheep or cows from the Pyrenees or in the Iberian Peninsula. I wanted to share with you several pictures, but I'm going to go very quickly through them because I think that we have to take into account several references to understand our culture, our territory, and our knowledge. This image that you see on screen is Europe 15,000 years ago. Europe was a mass of ice of 3,000 with a thickness of 3,000, and there was nothing. We had nothing. And all the flora was, and the fauna and the wildlife was concentrated in the peninsula. You can see some orange because at the level of the sea was there, and Mallorca and Menorca were connected, Corsica and Cerdeña as well. Italy did not exist because it was almost all of it ice. And taking into account that the melting took place from the east, that wildlife, that flora extended towards that area to the north. So that cultural reference, that what we have now here in Europe, has its origin in Spain and in Portugal. And many of what is still remaining is here in Spain. The huge biodiversity, the culture, the knowledge, 50 types of different races of cows and sheep, the huge livestock that we have, the different types of goats that have been selected over the centuries, have been has its origin here. These bravas y berrendas, etcétera, de Jaén que suben a Teruel. Are the packs of cows that go to the area of Teruel from the family Chico from Albarracín, and now his daughter is in charge of this from Jaén to Teruel. It's the only going next to Cañete. Biodiversity is unique in the world. We have 40 types of plants, and they can survive any kind of climate change, floods, intense cold. And that garden also depends on the grazing, because if the animals do not graze in there will be fires, and where we now have a garden, the landscape will become something very, very different. Also cork, Iberian pigs as well, that were mentioned before as one of the gourmet products that we have in the Spanish world, in the world. The wool as well. El majadeo fundamental, que ahora lo llaman ganadería holística, pero que es ni más ni menos que lo que han hecho nuestros pastores toda la vida, de ir what we call majadeo, which is fertilizing the landscape on a daily basis, so that the sheep could sleep on clean land, and for the land to have compost. Spain is now threatened with desertization because of a lack of these livestock. This is the network of
os dais cuenta de que lo tenéis todo ahí,
livestock trails, if we compare them with the roads of the road network, we see that the livestock trails, there are no abandoned areas, no marginal areas. They went next to thousands of kilometers, and they went through each town and each area, each municipality, because all the trails were there wasn't a difference. Every town was communicated. You could reach everywhere, and that is the project that I am developing myself. I'm Jesus Garzón. I am the member of the Council of La Mesta, and with the Council, the Summit of Rio de Janeiro, we are trying to fight against depopulation and fires, and trying to respect and protect the livestock trails. We have such as the pictures that I've shown to you, we have gone through all of these livestock trails with the livestocks, and you can see it on our website. This is, as you mentioned before today, this is the key to preserve the rural world, alive rural world, the generation renovation, the different areas such as the mountain areas that cannot be used throughout the winter months, but yes, in other months where temperatures are milder. And we have to take into account as well the risk of fires. You can also see there the 6 main areas: the Iberian system, Rioja, Burgos. Number 3, the one that we're focusing more on, Teruel, Cuenca, Guadalajara, and the area of the mountains of Javalambre and so on. 4 is the Pyrenees, of the area of the Ebro. The 5 is the central system, and 6 is the Penibetic system, the Sierra of Cazorla, Segura, and Granada, where we have many families and many livestock in that area still. This is a picture of how the livestock move from one place to another. They are able to cross dams, to cross rivers, and even they are able to cross around the mountain areas in some cases, and they help us to manage the different trails with thousands of animals. They guarantee they are the shepherds work in team, and sometimes that is how they are able to work. They work as a team, and in those mountain areas, for example, where we see in Somiedo, in the Cantabric area, they have huge livestock, but they also have the dogs, but the situation in the Pyrenees is very different from the one here, because you have wolves, as we mentioned there, but in other areas where there are mountains, the sheep can fall throughout because of the risky landscape. Or in Asturias and Cantabria, León and Valencia, we have increased the number of bears that, as a difference to what was mentioned earlier on, do not create any problems. We also have here in Madrid that from 1994 we try to stress the fact that we exist, that we need the livestock trails, that were about to be closed down in some autonomous communities, and a year after, in 1995, we were able to approve the law that was able to maintain those livestock trails.
We also have these cows of Cantabria near Cibeles. This is the point I wanted to reach. These are the forecasts of rainfall for the next 50 years. Practically all the Iberian Peninsula is going to receive 40% less rainfall. And it's going to be distributed randomly. Lots of storms, rainfall, as in the Romance de los Comuneros, the 500th anniversary. The priest said, don't try to forecast the future is already happening. We're on our limits. The CAP, the fact of having rice plantations where there's no water. There was also a joke by Roto. Apologies. We are taking water to deserts. The Ebro River has been deviated. Almería wanted more and more and more water. With these intensive plantations in the middle of the desert. And then we have to end up throwing out the surplus of production with people living in and working in very difficult conditions under these with high temperatures, all sorts of difficulties. When our minister talks about research, Pedro Duque, who's been traveling around the universe, look at the plastic management of our country. And he said, no, how is that going to be plastic? That's got to be a reflection. Plastic that ends up in the seas and the oceans and contaminates everything. Is this the development that we want? Is this what our politicians are promoting instead of really fighting for our future? It's quite incredible. So just remember this image. It's not a deserted Spain or anything like that. We won't have enough to even grow asparagus shortly. Risk of desertification in Spain, very high, medium, nearly half of Spain, 40%. If it's not management, with livestock that brings manure horse or cow. This is what is preserving the soil of Spain. In the past we had wild cattle, now we're talking about domesticated cattle, different kinds of goats and sheep, but they were managed. You can't say that bisons, for example, and reindeer. This is going to be substituting cattle. I'm going to take 500 wild boars from Huesca to La Rioja. No, well, you can take 500 or 500,000 cows or sheep if you have enough people, because we have 400,000 hectares of livestock trails, territories that have been preserved since the 13th century for shepherds, and we don't use these trails, just a few of us use them. And we also have the level of the sea that's rising, these 500 meters depth that we had in the past. We could practically
se está
walk
recuperando debido al
from
cambio
Corsica
climático y al
to
deshielo de los
Cerdeña.
polos y de los glaciares, los polos menos, porque al fin y al cabo los polos,
The
en el
ice
caso del Polo
caps,
Norte,
in the
el agua
case
también,
of
porque
the
estaba encima del océano
Antarctic
Atlántico, pero sí los glaciares
water,
y
but
todas las tundras y
glaciers
taigas que se están deshelando, ¿no? Entonces, todo eso va a afectar también
de-icing,
muchísimo a todas las zonas
will,
más
of course,
productivas. O sea,
have an impact on all
el delta del
the
Ebro, del delta
productive
del
areas.
Guadalquivir,
We cannot
los grandes
forget
cultivos,
about
la
the
percolación del agua de mar va a
Delta, the
acabar con
Guadalquivir
muchísimos recursos de
Delta,
agua dulce en
with
toda la
all
costa,
the
todas las
resources
infraestructuras
of
costeras,
fresh water,
ahora que se
all
habla
the
de
coast
toda esa enorme
infrastructures,
inversión
now that we're talking
del
about
corredor mediterráneo,
investments on the Mediterranean
dentro de
corridor,
poco puede que queden totalmente perdidas
they will
por
be
la
lost
subida del nivel del mar
due
o
to
afectadas, ¿no? El tema de los
the
incendios,
rise
que habéis
of
hablado,
sea level,
y la
fires,
ganadería extensiva
as you've
como
mentioned,
gran
extensive
reserva, porque
livestock
además
as
Europa se cree que es rica
reservoir,
porque el
because
80% de la
Europe
ganadería europea
thinks
se alimenta
it's
de
rich
soja transgénica
because
y de maíz que se importa de
80% of the
América.
population
A
is
costa
fed
de
with
destruir,
transgenic
por ejemplo, las selvas del
soybean,
Amazonas, que son también fundamentales
destroying
para el cambio
Amazon
climático, para la
forests,
adaptación al cambio climático. Y ahora mismo ya hay
and
muchos
right
científicos
now,
europeos que están
a lot of
amenazando
European
a Bolsonaro,
scientists
al nuevo
are
presidente de Brasil, con no
threatening
comprar más
Bolsonaro
maíz ni soja transgénica
with
a
not buying
Brasil,
any more
así sigues destruyendo las selvas, ¿no?
transgenic
O sea, que ya estamos en un mundo tan globalizado
soybeans
donde
and
cualquier
corn.
actuación pues nos afecta a
Any
todos.
impact
Y la forma de no
has
depender de los alimentos
an impact on all
importados
of
de
us,
países
any
emergentes
action.
es mantener
And
nuestra
of
propia
course,
producción,
we need to maintain our
como
own
hemos tenido hasta
production.
hace
We can't continue doing
30
this.
años, cuando éramos sedentarios,
30 years ago, there was a surplus.
no nos hizo cambiar de forma, ¿no?
We haven't really
Vale, pues
changed
ya estoy
that system.
terminando. El
Now I
único,
think I'm
el
finishing.
único problema
The
que tiene la transhumancia y que
problem,
tiene la
the only problem
biodiversidad en España
associated
es el
to
agua.
transhumance and
Entonces,
biodiversity
el
in
ganado
Spain
tiene que beber
is
todos los días,
water. Cattle needs to drink every day. The wells are making the phreatic layer
gastando millones de metros cúbicos
to go down.
en regar viñas y olivares
We
que nunca
are
habían sido regados y que tenían una calidad
irrigating
maravillosa sin
vineyards
necesidad
and
de
other
ser regados.
plantations
Ese
that
agua, como hemos visto,
didn't need
va a ser muy
water in the
necesaria para el
past.
consumo
This
humano en
water
un
is
futuro
going to be
inmediato. Son aguas
necessary
fósiles
for
que
human
no se
consumption
regeneran porque
in
lleva
the
un año
future.
más o menos. No, es que
This
son
water
aguas
is not
que las hemos
replaced,
heredado
it is
de
not
miles y miles de
substituted
años
with,
condiciones
it is
climáticas
a
totalmente
legacy
distintas a
of
las actuales, ¿no?
thousands of
Entonces, que
years of
tengamos
different
cuidado, como
weather
se ha dicho
conditions.
continuamente,
So we have to
gestionar el agua
be careful
adecuadamente.
with water management, we have to do it
Como
adequately.
muchos pastores llevan ya
And
en su
as
camiseta,
many
pues por
shepherds
una
show
ganadería
on their
sin
t-shirt
fronteras
in
políticas,
favor of livestock without any political frontiers in favor of transhumance. Thank you.
¿Se oye? Ahora sí. Bueno, gracias primero.
Thank
En primer
you,
lugar a
first of
todos
all,
por asistir,
to all of
por este
you
magnífico
for
evento, por la posibilidad de escuchar estas
attending this interesting
globales de
event,
dejar
for the
con
possibility of
un mare magnum
hearing
de
these
ideas, y
presentations
gracias
that
a
are a true
Francisco y a Pilar
brainstorming,
Murillo
and thank
por
you
estar
to
ahí siempre y
Francisco and
continuar,
Pilar
¿no?
Murillo
Por
for
invitarnos
their
tanto
work
y por todo
and
lo
their
que
efforts,
han hecho y hemos hecho durante este tiempo.
for all the things that we've done along the years.
No sé si hay un problema aquí de tecnologías entre
There's
Loki
a
y Windows.
problem here
No sé si va a ser
regarding
posible.
technology,
No hace falta,
compatibility
porque creo que ya es muy
between
tarde. Vamos a hacer lo más
different
sucinto
formats,
posible.
but I'm
Yo
going to
simplemente,
try to be
antes de
brief.
empezar a hablar, siempre
Before
sitúo
starting my presentation, I always
fundamental.
use a basic metaphor.
El despoblamiento es el
Depopulation
síntoma final,
is
la
the
condena de una
final
enfermedad
symptom
terrible que
of a
afecta a
terrible
todo el mundo
disease
rural.
that affects the rural
peninsular o
world
español.
in
Pero
Spain.
yo creo que hay más.
but I think there's more. It is not a problem of the rural world, it is a problem of the state. The lack of territory building management, the lack of model is something very old. Jesus has just mentioned the problem.
Las investigaciones de los últimos 4 años nos han demostrado que la revuelta de los comuneros y las germanías son el evento final, con esa lucha contra la dinastía invasora, de una campaña de protesta del mundo campesino, ganadero,
campaign of demonstrations by the agricultural and rural world that has been going for almost 20 years. The causes of depopulation and the lack of value of these territories are probably are older than that.
Esta peninsular, ¿no? Con su metrópolis en Flandes y en Austria, generó una política centrada en la exportación de materias primas ya en el
generated a policy focused on the exports of raw material in the 16th century, with policies that have existed for a long, long time.
Bravo y Padilla iban.
Bravo and Padilla, Maldonado.
Era el final de una revuelta que venía a protestar por el abandono de la política territorial, ¿no?
Protest that was linked to the abandonment of territorial policy. When Pilar has shown the border with Portugal, this has made me think of feeling that I've always had when I visited that territory. This country has been built based on different valleys from west to east, with wonderful trails and networks north-south that allowed us to compensate with the magic wand that was the cattle.
Es un colper de gredas, un fenómeno geológico interesantísimo, que quiere decir que eso es una greda inerte, buenísima para hacer cerámica, pero para nada más.
Maintains the territory.
Cuando yo llegué, dije, bueno, aquí los venteros del siglo XVI vivían aquí. ¿Cómo cultivaban? Había bancales abandonados.
People lived here in the 16th century. How did they cultivate the land?
En medio año aquello es un vergel.
In half a year, we've managed to have lots of vegetation in this area just by bringing cattle. And the territorial problem is very old, as I'm saying, and we have a magnifying glass that allows us to see this in other territories. A few months ago, I had to go to Fuensanta, a small village in La Mancha. This area is quite remote. Fuensanta has 10% of the population that it had at the beginning of the 20th century. It has an incredible historical heritage. How can this be? Well, it's been maintained because of the loss of population. This magnifying glass allows us to observe this problem, but as I've mentioned, the problem is global. There's also a basic problem that can help us set the context, and it explains the minister's actions apart from political interests. The loss of cultural value of the rural sphere, the disdain towards its products, its values. Only one product has been internationally acknowledged, ham, Iberian ham. The rest of products, if you go to other countries and you ask about Spanish cheese, we've lost 80% of the variety. Wine, we're still not holding the first positions. The best oil, everyone says Italy. Our country has never valued its products, except for for
fundamentalmente Euskadi,
Euskadi,
en el que un vasco no se
Basque
entiende
country.
sin su raíz
Basque
rural,
needs
agraria,
its
como
rural
los franceses, sentados
agricultural
a una mesa
roots
comiéndose
as
el queso y el vino,
French
como
people
decía
eating
también el vasco,
wine and
el
cheese.
queso y el vino.
I,
Pero,
of course,
para ellos es básico, es un
adore
elemento
all of this, but
constitutivo,
it
¿no?
is basic for
Sabéis que
them.
los presidentes franceses durante
French presidents, as you know, during 150 years had to be mayors of a small village before becoming presidents. It was a non-written rule, and all presidents of the Republic had to be before mayors of small villages.
Hacerle un monumento a Marián Grande.
Then they took the opportunity to make monuments, etc., but these roots don't exist in Spain. Before we were mentioning Germany, but French castles, the Loire palaces. Joaquin Carvalho discovered this 150 years ago. Beneath these palaces, there were Middle Ages foundations, but French aristocracy has always lived in these palaces, and the fight against monarchs and kings was always linked to strengthening power locally in different territories. This hasn't existed in Spain. This allows us to talk about the roots of the current CAP, the non-existence of agrarian models. As the largest decline in population took place in the 60s and 70s after the end of the dictatorship. The country was opened to other countries, and this coincides with the approval of the Agricultural Act in the USA that has to do with the remains of soy, beans, and the hyperproduction of corn. The hyperpopulation, the extensive livestock model that was then implemented in other countries. Despite the lack of acknowledgement, Spain was the first country to open its doors. Later on, an institution in Spain approved regulation to be able to buy the total soy and corn that was exported from the US, selling it subsidized in the national and international markets. So Spain was the door that opened the pathway towards extensive livestock. This approval of the deal is directly related to the depopulation, because it meant the loss of competencies of local products. This system that is completely detached from the rural and sustainable and the cultural aspects of the country remained. In the 16th century, the model of the state wasn't quite clear. Then we have perpetuated this problem. But in political terms, we've opened our doors to the presence of extensive production systems.
Bunge, que son las americanas que estaban en este tema. Me voy a centrar,
I'm going to focus, if I can pass the slide,
no vamos a perder el tiempo intentando llegar.
but I don't want to waste too much time.
El tema de la PAC
CAP,
supongo que todos conocéis los dos pilares básicos
I
de
assume
la PAC,
that you
de la
both
política
know
agraria común.
its
Hay un
main
primer pilar
pillars. There's
centrado
one
directamente, por así decirlo, en la
pillar
producción,
that focuses
y un
on
segundo
production,
pilar
and the other
centrado en
pillar
los aspectos
focuses on
igual llegamos a ver. Pues que no, bueno, voy a dejar que por lo menos así lo podemos ver, que es la propuesta de los colectivos que están defendiendo por otra PAC.
Can be seen, this slide can be seen, the
os lo dejo ahí y ya está.
proposals by certain groups that are proposing the transformation of the
El problema
CAP.
básico es que cuando España entra en la Unión Europea,
When Spain becomes part of the European Union,
amplio y
it
potente
is strong
agroganadero, pero
agricultural and
con un
livestock
modelo
producer
productivo totalmente
with
ajeno al de las grandes
productive
potencias agroganaderas europeas,
system
y
that
con
is
una
completely
PAC
different from
diseñada
the
para esas
great
grandes potencias
European
preexistentes,
powers.
puesto que la habían negociado y
And the
desarrollado
CAP
ellos.
had been designed
También
for
con una
those
gran
other
presencia de la
powers,
agroindustria y de los
also with a
grandes
strong
fondos,
presence
¿no?
of agricultural
La
and
OECD,
industrial
de
sectors,
las
the
cuatro
funds
grandes
from the
multinacionales que controlan la materia prima
OECD, with the
alimentaria,
main multinational companies that control
Yo
the
creo que esta
main
inexistencia de
raw
modelos nos ha llevado
materials.
a unas negociaciones caóticas,
This led
sistemáticamente,
to
¿no?
chaotic
En las que nunca hemos
negotiations.
conseguido
We never
ni tener claro el modelo, porque yo
managed
creo que el
to
territorio nunca se ha tenido claro, ni cuál es la
have
realidad,
a
la
clear
biodiversidad,
model in
la
our
complejidad
mind,
de la
biodiversity,
producción, ni tener claro un modelo de futuro, ¿no?
complexity of production, and
Y
we
eso nos ha
haven't managed to have
llevado
a clear
fenómenos
future
tan
model, and this
interesantes
has
sobre los
led
que me voy a centrar como un modelo
to
claro,
certain
clave, que es el
interesting
de la producción de
events.
carne.
One has to do with meat
La producción de
production.
carne es en este momento el
Meat
segundo producto
production
industrial
is the
de
second
nuestro Estado.
industrial product of
Y además
our
con una diferencia
state,
importante, que es que el
with a
resto, el
clear
primero es el automóvil,
difference.
que fundamentalmente
Number
somos
one
mano de
position
obra
is
y
cars,
facturaciones de empresas
manufacturing
foráneas, ¿no? Somos una
plants
parte más de
and
grandes empresas alemanas o
workforce
francesas.
for
La carne, sin
German
embargo,
and
es
French
nuestro producto
companies.
estrella.
Meat is our
y-
flagship product.
Bueno, no lo conseguimos. Bueno, vamos a ver. ¿Cómo producimos? Es que no avanza.
How do we produce this? I'm sorry, but the mouse doesn't seem to be working.
En este momento, Cuenca, por ejemplo, mi provincia.
Cuenca, for
desde
example,
Cañete
my
hasta,
province,
Iniesta, desde el norte al sur.
from north to
o
south.
desde Pedroñeras, mi
o-
provincia, donde voy yo a ver las vacas cuando bajan, cuando
Pedroñeras, when I
puedo. Y
go
agradecerle a Jesús esa magnífica recuperación de
to
la
watch the
Cataluña,
cows.
es una gozada.
Thank
Estamos
you,
en el
Jesus, for
territorio
your
cero de la
contributions.
instalación de Macobra.
This is
Tenemos la
the
suerte de fincar Lopsa, la
zero
zona
ground of
básica de
the
Mercadona,
whole
de Tarancón.
system. We've got
Es una empresa experimentada en la provincia y en
company
la región,
that
con
is
buenas relaciones
settled
políticas,
in
y el eje
province
Cuenca,
and
Valencia,
region, and the ex
que está
Cuenca
en
Valencia
Mercadona,
with
Madrid, pues pasa
the
atravesando
headquarters
la
of
provincia de Cuenca de
Mercadona.
este a oeste. Y tenemos
And we also have
esta semana pasada
last
36
week,
solicitudes de macrogranjas en pueblos de la provincia.
36
36.
requests
No nos da
of
tiempo a responder, no nos da
large
tiempo a conocer
farms.
dónde está la iniciativa para intentar afrontarla.
And we can't really keep
¿Qué
up with
significa la
this,
PAC
with the
para la
rhythm, with
producción
this
de carne
rhythm.
industrial?
What does the
El
CAP
75-73%
mean
del
for
coste
the meat
de un
production?
animal
73% of the cost of maintaining an animal has got to do
El
with
60%
the food
más,
that
casi el
it eats,
70%
with the
del
fodder.
cereal importado
70%
y del
of
cereal producido
imported
está subvencionado.
and
En un
produced cereal is
prácticamente en un
subsidized.
55%.
Practically
Pero
55%
de ese
of it is
cereal,
subsidized.
el
Out of
70%
this
se dedica
cereal,
a la alimentación de ganado.
70% is
Estoy hablando de memoria porque
devoted
no tengo los datos
to
delante y
feeding
la memoria falla, pero estamos hablando de esas
cattle.
cantidades.
So
Lo cual
these
quiere
are
decir que el
the figures
55% del
that we
coste
are
del kilo
managing.
de cerdo
So
que
55% of the
está
cost of the kilo
subvencionado.
of
Y por la vía
pig meat
forrajera.
is
Pero esa parte
subsidized.
hay un 18%.
Out of this,
Eso significa que el 37% del coste de la carne está
37% of the cost of meat is then
sobre el precio de la carne. Pero hay un
subsidized.
18%
But
más de
there's
subvención
an
directa.
additional
Estamos hablando de
18%
que
of
casi
direct
el
subsidies.
60%
So we're talking
del
about
coste de la carne
nearly
industrial está
60% of
subvencionado.
industrial meat cost being subsidized, as if it were extensive. It is total imbalance. Our CAP is based on large livestock and agricultural productions since the 70s.
Para la producción. O, en este caso, el riego de leñosas, que es un gravísimo problema en la cuenca del Júcar, con ese 20% de declive que es más.
We have the decline of certain
está dedicándose al
regions.
riego de leñosas, olivos, almendros
We
y vid,
are
para
irrigating
competir
certain
en un
types of
mercado de
trees,
bajo precio y de baja
such as
calidad.
olive trees, to be able to compete
Gran cantidad con
in
bajo
markets
precio y baja calidad.
of
Ese es el modelo de PAC
low
que hemos
quality.
implantado en el
This
Estado y
is
que ha
the
implantado
CAP model
este
that we
país
have
a lo largo de sus
implemented
gobiernos, ¿no?
in this country.
Entonces, nosotros definimos, este es un modelo de una serie de organizaciones
is a model
que están planteando otra
associated
PAC,
to
pero hablando pronto y
different
claramente, lo que
organizations
sí que
that
tenemos
are
claro es decir,
in
necesitamos
favor of a
una
different
PAC ibérica, adecuada
CAP.
a
We
nuestro
need an
territorio.
Iberian CAP that is
Necesitamos una PAC
adapted to
centrada
our
con un
context.
crecimiento
It has
importantísimo
to
del segundo
be
pilar y un decrecimiento del primer pilar
focused
como modelo
on
europeo.
the second
Y en
pillar,
nuestro caso específico
and in
es
our
que el primer pilar
specific
ha de centrarse
case, the
precisamente
first
en el
pillar
mantenimiento de la
has
biodiversidad
to be
y en la producción de
related
calidad
to the
y en
maintenance
la
of
producción
biodiversity
no
and
de
the production
almendras irrigadas
of
para
quality,
competir con la americana, sino de almendras de alta calidad
high
para conseguir un
quality
producto
almonds,
valorado,
to be able
sano,
to have high
ecológico
quality,
y
sustainable, organic
sostenible, que además ayude a sostener el
product
planeta,
that
¿no?
will
Evidentemente
contribute
una
towards the
PAC
sustainability
feminizada,
of the
una PAC
planet.
juvenil que potencie este modelo. Pero otro aspecto fundamental
But another
que yo creo
important
que
aspect
define el total
which
es
defines
la
the total
discriminación
is
positiva.
positive
Necesitamos
discrimination. We
políticas de
need
discriminación positiva
policies
para el mundo rural y para el
that
mundo
take into
despoblado.
account positive
Esto
discrimination
pasa
within
por
the
la
rural
PAC y pasa
world.
por tres cosas
And this
más y
starts
acabo.
with the CAP and
Pasa
with
por
other
tener un
two
verdadero
things.
think tank,
We have to take into we have to have a
y aquí creo que hay
state
personas
think tank,
suficientes como
and I
para
believe
dotar
we
al
have here
70%
people with more than enough qualities to work in that think tank. We need a commission of the rural world in the Congress, in the Parliament, that has never existed and needs to make sure that there's a filter and a policy of positive discrimination policy that is taken into account, and we need to achieve and be linked to culture and to critics to make sure that knowledge and flavors of the world are also important. I need to finish because I'm being told to do so. Thank you very much. Thank you to the speakers. We have two speakers left, but we are going to do that after lunch. So we're going to have lunch in the same place where we had the coffee break. We have a catering, and we really hope that around 3:15 we can start to be able to start at 3:30 because two of the speakers in the morning have to be changed to the afternoon, so we're very limited as to timing. Thank you very much.